go ahead and take it away.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to, what is this, May's CAG meeting. Yeah, what month is it really? It's been going by. I understand that the COVID has really messed up a lot of our activities. This may be one of the normals for the next 3 or 4 or 5 months. So as we move along, I guess we're all going to get used to it, and life will be okay. We have some housekeeping. I would ask that everybody look out to mute. It would be up in your upper right-hand corner if you put your mouse up there. If you'd mute your voice, and then as we move through the agenda, I'll call on the next person to speak. We'll let them go ahead and speak, and then I'll look for any input from the rest of the folks. Just raise your hand and unmute. I'll give you a holler and just name you out, and that way we'll keep from talking over everybody. Does that sound okay? Does that work with you guys? Is that okay? Nodding heads works really well. It's almost like being in preschool again. So if you need to leave, wave and leave. Don't worry about it. We're all here to hear. And if you're done hearing, head on out. We will have an opportunity for public comments after the agenda items have been covered. So if there's any need for that. And then before we go any further into the presentation, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves once again. Not having our bylaws in front of us, I can't read them, but we're here for the Smurfit-Stone EPA. Go ahead, Jerry.
We are the French Smurfit-Stone Community Advisory Group. This is our May meeting, so welcome everybody. I'm part of the admin team, and it's really nice to see everybody, even though it's not the best of the world, but we'll make do, as Brian said. So we have a pretty busy agenda. So with that, I'll pass it on.
All right. I'm Brian Campbell. I'm a community member in the Houston area. Interest is contamination from my well and the community and the development of the property. So if we can go, Brian, the next guy. Would you like to, Brian, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm Brian Markoyak with the National Resource Damage Program.
Thank you, Brian.
I think it might be feedback from Trevor's, not to like call him out, but because it does the yellow box when there's like noise coming. So if Trevor, you could mute, I think that.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes. We can hear you. I can actually mute people, so.
Okay, sorry about that. When I'm muted, it's unmuted, and when it says I'm muted, I'm not muted. So I got to do the opposite. So.
Thank you, Ali. All right. Well, I got to tell you, my names are all messed up. So CSF 842.
Hey, this is Connie. I don't know how to change that, but I would like to. Everybody knows how.
All right, Connie, thanks and welcome. And then Marilyn.
Yeah, this is, despite the name, David Schmetterling, Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks.
Thanks, Daryl. It sounds like we're on our own personal computers. And then Richard.
Oh, Rick Ringlab, Houston resident.
Bruce, you're muted.
Yeah, Bruce Sims, Houston resident and member of the CAG administrative team.
Very good. Thank you, Bruce. Deborah? And Deborah,
Hi.
you're muted. There we go.
I'm not muted. Okay, I am muted. No, it's Deborah Franson from Senator Tester's office. Thank you.
And thank you for signing in. John?
Hi, John DeArmond with the Clark 4 Coalition.
Welcome. And we have another really interesting one, TSEIB.
Yeah. Can you hear me? This is Todd Seib with the Water Quality District.
Hi, Todd.
Hi.
Is that your personal computer? I know that's nosy, but
No, it's a work computer. I'm working from home, so yeah.
excellent. And these are, it's almost like acronyms. Jessica, and you are muted.
Hi, I'm Jess. Just an interested Montana resident. Wanted to hear about this.
Excellent. Thank you. The more the merrier. It's wonderful to have folks come that are interested. And then we have Allie.
Hi, Allie Archer, EPA project manager.
Welcome. Thanks. And Lucky Lundy Z.
Laura Lundquist with the Missoula Current.
Thank you, Laura. Sarah?
Hi, Sarah Edinburgh with Montana DEQ.
Thank you, Sarah. How do I want to go? Jerry? Oh, Mr. Shargo. You are muted. There we go.
Hi, this is Jennifer Cherga with EPA.
Thanks, Jen. And then Will?
Hi, this is Will Folland. I'm a toxicologist with the EPA in the Denver office. I took over the human health risk assessor duties for this site a couple months ago, and this is my first tag with you all. So it's nice to be here. I'm looking forward to working with everybody. Little background, I came to EPA in 2016. Before that, I was a research associate at Michigan State University studying the effects of PCBs and dioxins and furans on mink. So once again, happy to be here. Looking forward to working with y'all.
Oh, super. Thank you, Will. It's good to have you here. We have more folks coming on. Dave Strohmeyer just came on. We're doing introductions right now.
Yeah, this is Dave Strohmeyer, Missoula County Commissioner.
Welcome. Thanks, Dave. And then we have another one, CFZ 2795. And you're muted. There we go.
Is that mine?
There we go. Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, Don, different fellas up right now. I think what we'll do is keep going. Folks are muted. Ron, you from MCAT, you want to give a holler? Excellent. Thank you. And Ron, there is no video coming in on yours, as well as Will's. Okay. Never know. Keith.
Yeah, this is Keith Large with Montana DEQ, and I don't have a camera on this laptop, so I can see most of you, though.
Well, excellent. Excellent. Thanks, Keith. Did you have a presentation tonight? I didn't see on the agenda.
No, just if Allie asked me to help her with anything when she's given the update.
Okay, super. Thanks, Keith. And then we have Joe.
Yeah, Joe Rocco with EPA.
Thanks, Joe. Jennifer, I see you're on now. And you're muted.
Are you talking to me?
I am. How's it going?
Good. I've been on the call. I'm doing well. I'm just part of the CAG admin team.
Excellent. Okay, and then we're just doing introductions right now. We'll go into the agenda here in just a second. Don?
Hi, I can't see myself, so I don't know if my video is coming through or not.
No video from you.
Okay, I'll try and get it figured out, but at least I'm vocal. Don Latham, I'm a 6 Mile resident.
Excellent. Thank you, Don, and thanks for coming on. And last but not least will be Andrew Gorder. And you're muted. You're still muted, Andrew. There we go.
Can you hear me?
I've got you now, yes.
Sorry, I'm having some technical issues. I probably won't show up on video, but Andrew Gorder with the Clark Fork Coalition. Happy to be here.
Well, thank you, and we're really happy to have you here. All right, so we've gone through. Everybody is looks like they're all muted. I thank you very much for that. That does help the presentation. Let's start with Jennifer Harrington with highlights from the April EPA meeting. Jennifer, take it away.
Thank you. I'm just going to briefly go over what was talked about because I think Allie will probably cover some of the issues that were discussed on the quarterly call on April 28th. But we did discuss, they talked about spring groundwater sampling is scheduled for June. They were talking about the conceptual site model is in phase 2 or the second draft of that, and hopefully will be ready for distribution. They said that Allie spoke that they were continuing their mission objective work. EPA is working from home. The berm inspections make up essential infrastructure per the governor's directive, so that work will continue to be done even if stay-at-home orders are reinstated. They are following CDC guidance on how to establish social distancing, minimum workforce, avoid contact with visitors, office work remotely, and hygiene protocols. And the winter 2020 update is now online. Allie went over that OU 1 is 1,200 acres of ag land, OU 2 is 250 acres of core industrial area, and OU 3 is the 1,700 acres making up the historic wastewater treatment area. The berm inspections right now are monthly. Weekly inspections would be triggered when the Clark Fork River rises above 10.5 feet river height, and daily inspections would be triggered if the Clark Fork reaches above flood stage, which would be 11 feet. If stability issues are identified, she said then actions could be taken. Newfields did inspect the berm on April 16th, but at the conference call, EPA had not yet received a berm inspection report. Groundwater, they want to investigate they have been investigating seasonal groundwater fluctuations, looking at quality, flow, and hydrology at the site. The objectives were to understand the impacts of the irrigation ditch. They are currently still negotiating the 2020 groundwater plan. Brian Sanchez talked about the fish data. They had not yet did not have complete validation reports yet. When they do have it, they were going to link lab IDs to field IDs and the species, like where they collected the samples and the tissue type. They have to plan a draft OU2, OU3 risk assessment for August or September, and then there will be a comment period with the goal of a November or December final baseline ecological risk assessment. So far, there has been no BTAG meeting scheduled. Mary Price from the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribe asked about a quality assurance plan for collecting water samples. Will they be grab samples? The 2017 discharge appeared and the EPA mobilized a removal team, so that I think she was just wondering how to find out how the samples will be taken. There was discussion of redevelopment of OU2 and OU3, which are now owned by Wakefield Kennedy, and there's a section owned by P.A. Kaufman, I think. Mary Price asked if they could explain how the new ownership affects the responsibility in cleanup. David Schmetterling asked about spring sampling that was expected to happen right around now. The timing of the sampling is critical. If Fish, Wildlife, and Parks had anticipated being available, he had asked why were the species in the site so important last year and now they are not important? How can they make the decisions about the baseline ecological risk assessment and future sampling if they do not yet have the fish sampling data back? Decisions have been made with the data, but the data has not been made public. So those were just concerns raised during that meeting. Allie said that they had decided that a subset of the data would meet their needs and had to use the unvalidated data to make some decisions to mobilize and get out into the field. Brian Sanchez said they want credible, defensible data. And David Schmetterling did comment that 2 of the samples that weren't taken, that they had planned on taking this year were control or trip blanks, and they didn't get them because they switched boats. He also spoke about that they were part of the study plan was worked on together with FWP, and in the study design, all of these things were important, and I think he'll talk about that tonight. Keith did say another thing to remember is that there were 2 years of data and that this spring there was no possibility of sampling because out-of-state contractors are not available. And they did say that there will be in-depth discussions next month on these issues. And Allie did finalize that with, as soon as we get validated data, she said they will be sharing it with us. There were questions about who the PRPs are now. And Allie said that they had sent a form called a 104E to request information of Wakefield Kennedy to understand their liability of the site, asking what their interests are and the ownership of the site. There is an existing agreement still with M2 Green, International Paper, and West Rock. They are jointly and severally liable to complete that work. M2 Green is still a signatory to the administrative order on consent. So they're taking reasonable steps with the gravel pit to understand their interests, but have not seen the need yet to send them a 104E. And finally, the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes had requested a boundary line relocation public hearing through the county commissioners to better understand the implications of that relocation, and the EPA's presence was requested.
Is that the end of the report, Jen?
Yes, that's all.
Oh, okay. Are there any questions for Jennifer? I see no hands. Jerry, do you have any further input?
Yes, and Dave Strohmeyer, you can jump in here too. Andrew Hagemeyer sent me an email and asked if I had heard any more on the boundary line relocation, and I said no. He checked around and said that nothing had happened with it yet. But interestingly enough, the Flying H stables did get a gravel pit approved. So that's just adjacent to the mill site. The wells are just right along that property line. So anyway, there's a gravel pit that's going to go in there. And then we haven't seen, there was a lot of correspondence. Keith, you can jump in here too about the correspondence on the gravel pit from, I think it's called Free Cycles.
Excuse me. So no, Final Cycles, that's the redevelop. Yeah, those are the redevelopers that want to go into the OCC building, the corrugated cardboard building that's located in OU2. And their proposal is they need a building that has railroad access, and they want to recycle plastics. So they had contacted the DEQ recycling program, Dusty Johnson that works in that program. And then she got a hold of me and I got a hold of Allie, and we had some conversations with them. And actually about the last time Allie and I were able to meet face to face, we had a call with those staff. There hasn't been a whole lot on that one recently. I think the COVID-19 has kind of slowed them down a little bit. So they would have to work with the DEQ permit folks on what they would need to get that operation up and running. And they're working close with Wakefield Kennedy on leasing the building, and they've had conversations with the county about what kind of waste they might generate. And their proposal is to take one of the old corrugated tanks that's still out there, those great big huge, like they look like concrete blocks built into a tank. They're proposing to fill one of those up and then modify the system so that would become their fire suppression water. And then what they're going to do is bring in like a semi tractor trailer, kind of like they use it at like fire camps and stuff like that. So that would be their bathroom facilities, so they could have a closed system and not have any discharge. Basically, when the tank gets full, they just send out a septic tank and empty it and take it back to town and stuff, to the sewer plant and stuff. So they've been working with the county on some of those issues and making sure that all happens, but I haven't heard anything on a public meeting for them. And then the gravel pit things, there's been a lot. There's the one gravel pit is that's being proposed is located in OU1 down on the south side. And I'm not sure, the name we have for that one is PA Prospects. And what did you say, Jerry? What was the name you?
So adjacent to the mill site is Flying H Stables, also known as Magnolia Enterprises. And that gravel pit did get approved.
Oh, okay. So that's news to us, because last week, all we had heard was that it was being talked about and stuff. We hadn't heard anything.
So I should back up. Keith, I'm sorry. Let me back up just a hair. There was no public meeting on that one because there wasn't any objection to it. So they did send a letter back to them. There was some, I can't think of the word. They had to fix some things on their application.
Yeah, they call those application deficiencies. And so they have to fix that. And so, yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird. Those houses that are on Fairbanks Lane, if they were actually to approve these two proposed gravel pits, there would be one to the north and one to the south.
I know it.
Now, for background information, the reason that people are looking for gravel pit is because there's a big MDT usually starts about 4 or 5 years before they're actually on the ground doing construction. Takes a lot of planning and stuff. And there's plans to widen Mullen Road all through there and give it shoulders. And so if you remember, there's a lot of ditches that run along there, stormwater ditches. And so I guess they're going to have to bury pipes. So they need a lot of gravel to fix that and make the road safer. So that came up like a year and a half ago. It's always, they post stuff like that on MDT's webpage. So then people are looking for gravel so they can sell it to that project. Anyway, so for Allie and I, we just keep passing on any information that the
I was going to jump in. Yeah, Keith, sorry. I was going to jump in real quick because we're talking about the PA Prospects gravel pit because it's on Operable Unit 1. That was one of the, like Katie Garson-Forba is the open cut mining permit kind of contact that we've been working with. And so she let us know when they were putting their application in, she shared their application with EPA. And then PA Prospects requested a reasonable steps comfort status letter from EPA. So we reviewed their application and can provide that kind of information to them. But she said they're also going to receive a notice of deficiencies as well. And so I think that one's still like, they have to come back and provide a lot more information for DEQ open cut. We're working on reviewing the application that we have from them right now to get them a comfort status letter. But that's kind of the update for the one that's located on the Superfund site.
Yeah, and also with that, the one that's on the site, I think it was the county and Trevor and those guys, they asked Katie to have those potential operators do a water resource assessment. So we got a call from a gal at Morrison Merrily there in Missoula, and provided her, showed her where there's a bunch of groundwater elevation data from the wells that been sampled on site and stuff that she could use to plug into a model. And I guess Allie and the EPA drafted that letter, and I don't think there's been a whole bunch else news since last week. Allie, has there on that one?
No.
Yeah, and then on the new one, the Magnolia one, the one that'll be to the south of Fairbanks Lane, yeah, it's just east of the very southern portion of the site. So it's east of where all those 12 production wells were down, way down south. But Katie and Colleen with the open cut, they're dealing with that. And so we kind of, I think between the conversation we just had here, I think that we know about as much as you guys do, that it's all in the process of being worked out, and they have their public process. And I don't know about the meetings or any of that, but that's who you need to contact, is Katie Forba Garzon at DEQ. She's the open cut handling those. And then Colleen, she's like a scientist that helps her with stuff.
Okay, Keith, that's is that it for you? I see you're muted, so I guess.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, Jennifer, Allie, you guys. Oh, wait a minute. There is no more input or discussion on the last topic. Okay. Don't see any hands. So Jennifer or Allie, which one would like to talk about the EPA update, or did we just get it?
So I think Jen did a really good job going over our call last Tuesday. And so I was just going to supplement it with some things that have happened since last Tuesday. But so starting with kind of, I'll touch on EPA's telework status. We're still, although Montana is doing a phased reopening, EPA as an agency is still teleworking for the foreseeable future. And I can let you guys know when that changes, but that's kind of all we've been told right now, is no end date, and keep working to identify the mission essential work and anything else that might come up, but stay working from home for the time being. And then I wanted to go over the berm inspections. We did get our berm inspection report from April, and that's on the website now. So if you go to the EPA Smurfit-Stone website, under publicly available documents or under the berm inspections, you should see the latest one, which was April 2020. And there was no issues reported from that berm inspection. Like the flows were low, so they were able to see the whole berm. And they looked at the cracks that were identified from after the 2018 flood and made note of those, and made note of the animal burrows too. And didn't see any progression on those that would cause alarm, but are keeping track of those. And then there's some photos in there you can look at too. And then I do have an update on the risk assessment. So I think it was Tuesday we received the validated data packages, and Brian's team got to work with Will looking at what everything that was in those packages, making sure they were complete. And there actually was a need to go back to the lab to kind of get a complete data package and understand how they calculated and did all their validation reports. So that's all done now. We are confident with the 2018 and 2019 validation packages, and we're working to get those into our record system and on the EPA website. So they're going to be really large documents to download, and the easiest way to make them publicly available will be through our website. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what that's going to look like on the website. So there's going to be 2 different packages, one for 2018 and one for 2019. And each year package will consist of a PDF lab report and a PDF validation report. And it will also include the summary data table looking at TEQ and total PCB data. And then a crosswalk that Jen was talking about, linking lab IDs to field IDs. And so those will be available on the website. And Brian was kind of loading them into our online share drive. It's very interesting trying to get this all done virtually, but I think I'll let you guys know. Some people are off tomorrow that are kind of critical in that record center to website transition. So it could be early next week, but I'll send an email out to the CAG and the BTAG, and we'll follow with an email to the BTAG about kind of timeline, when we can set a meeting, and then if people have questions on what's in those initial data packages. And then I just wanted to go over with the CAG, since we're on a call right now, just kind of what the goal of that data is and what's not included in the data packages yet. So in 2018, EPA identified the need for additional fish data to address uncertainty in our risk assessments. So this data is just to fulfill the human consumption of fish on the Clark Fork River, and looking at if we can tie contaminants in the Clark Fork River to our site. So just further confirming or looking at that link, and also understanding that human health risk. So right now we only have the validated data and the reports. We haven't done any of that evaluation on our own yet. And Brian and Will got the data and put it into a usable form for everyone. They haven't looked at it yet. So we're going to take the time too in the next month to look at and evaluate that data. And we'll provide a report similar to the 2018 report, looking at data usability for 2018 and 2019. So in about a month, we'll have that report of 2019 data usability, and then we'll use the data to update our risk assessments, which will look like more in the fall. And we'll probably have a public meeting about updated human health risk assessments and our final biological, ecological risk assessment. And also when we have our BTAG, when we look at, does this data set meet those EPA specific Superfund needs of looking at uncertainty in our risk assessment, we can kind of answer those questions. I know there's a huge interest in this set of data for a lot of different stakeholders, but whether or not it satisfied EPA's need for our risk assessments, we feel like it can do that we have the information we need to finalize those, but we'll work with our BTAG to make sure everyone has that same understanding, or if there are any data gaps, we can of course go back out, but we're hopeful that we can complete our risk assessments with what we have so far. But there's always that room for discussion. With COVID-19 happening this year, it wasn't going to be a good year to get back out right away, and we hadn't planned that at the conclusion of 2019. We're at the end of 2019 very hopeful that we had what we needed, looking at 2018 and 2019 to finalize our risk assessments. And so that's kind of the timeline we've been working toward. And it's exciting, we finally got that data.
Yeah. I have a question. So if there are data gaps, you know, this is from 2018. Mm-hmm. So I guess the burning question is if there's data gaps, are we looking at another 2 years for results? Because this process has seemed to really drag on, and it's such a vital piece to progressing. And I think there's a real sense of frustration of the wait is really kind of been a challenge.
Yeah. And it's been an incredible sampling event to undertake. And so I'm excited that I got to do this as a part of my career, is get out there and collect fish to answer this question. And I've talked a lot with the lab folks about the process of looking at all 200 PCB congeners and running that through the lab and processing the fish. And so it's not just, you know, your water samples or your metal samples in soil. It's a whole different ball game. And so we always knew it was going to take a little bit of time, and we're hopeful that we have what we need to move through the remedial investigation. But if we don't, and our risk assessors aren't comfortable, and Will's on the phone to make that determination, if we don't feel comfortable saying what the risk is to human health, then we'll go back out and collect more. But again, we're limiting that gap every time. Going out in 2019, we closed it even further. And so if we see a need, hopefully we can get it in one go if we had to go back out. I was just going to scroll down and see what other, if there was any additional updates. I think just that the berm inspection got online, and I should be letting you guys know early next week about the availability of the validated fish data, and then working with the BTAG to set a date. Yeah, I think Jen had the rest of the updates. I know some of the people on this video call weren't on the teleconference, and so, but I feel like between Jen and I, that's probably the full site update from EPA for now.
All right, John, you had a question. Diarmet?
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Ellie, I think last week on the call you mentioned that the supplemental biological data was going to go up on the EPA website. Is that right?
Yes.
I haven't had a chance to look at that yet, but does it include any analysis, or is it just kind of in the same stage as the fish data where it's just the raw data?
Yeah, it's just a data summary report of like the DACE and the benthics that were collected in 2018. And so all of that will go together with the fish to put toward a draft eco risk assessment.
Okay, and there's been no BTAG discussion of any of that so far. It's still just kind of in the raw data stage.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, Brian, go for it.
Kelly, did I hear you say this is going to be PDFs on the website? Is it going to go in Scribes as well, or is there going to be an easily downloadable form
Yes,
of this
I'm
data?
glad you asked that. Well, and that's what we kind of played around with. How could you get it easily downloadable when we're doing it all virtual? And so we don't have that availability on the EPA website, but once it goes into Scribes, that's where people can download it from. And so that'll take a little more time to get. Everything will be in PDF on the website. So I know for those who want to play around with the numbers, not so usable, but once it gets into Scribes, you'll be able to download it from there.
All right. Maryland.
Thanks. This is actually in response to John's question about whether there was any BTAG discussion of the invertebrate sampling in the ponds. I can't remember if it was at the last BTAG meeting, which was a little over a year ago, or if it was with the trustees or some other groups, but we have had discussions about the substitution of invertebrate genera, in those samples, especially with the addition of some, migratory large organisms that might not reflect the conditions at the site. But I can't remember if that was at the BTAG meeting. And there were some other concerns as well in terms of the volume of samples that were collected and things like that. Mm-hmm. But there have been some discussions with at least some of the trustees. And like I said, it might have been at a BTAG meeting. Somebody might have a better memory than myself.
And yeah, I remember those. I thought they were maybe going like back and forth in comment tables on it for the sweep netting versus the other way that invertebrates were collected. And so I'm assuming that would be another topic when we look at the collective data set that we have for the eco risk that we'd probably revisit.
So just so I understand correctly, so all of these data, the fish, the macroinvertebrates, the DACE, et cetera, we won't really have any idea what it means until it's been run through the risk assessment models. That's where we get our, if possible, conclusions about risks from what this data tells us. Is that right?
Yes, and that's why I lean heavily on Will and Brian. I know Brian's not on, but they're the ones who will actually run the numbers and advise the project team about the risks on site to those receptors.
And so we're looking then hopefully fall of 2020 for the draft versions of those revised risk assessments that will include analysis of these data. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Are we satisfied with all that information? Because I'm lost now. There's a data gap that I have.
Brian, I just have one question for Ali about the upcoming groundwater sampling event. In past, it seems as if we've had an opportunity to look at the groundwater sampling plan before it's initiated so that we could comment. Mm-hmm. There doesn't seem to be adequate time at this point if you're planning on sampling in June. I'm just wondering, because in past people, in the BTAG particularly have seen shifts in what was sampled suddenly in the groundwater. And I'm just wondering if there would be an opportunity for us to look at the plan before you initiated the sampling event.
Yes, Jen, and that's been the major driver to try to get consensus and get this out just within our internal team. And so and I think we're almost ready to come to agreement on the final selection of wells and analytes for the sampling event, and we'll share it. And if you see anything or have concerns, let us know, of course, and we can go over any differences. I think this one doesn't look, we were hoping to have a CSM that we could have a more focused sampling event, but because we don't have a CSM, it's still a pretty broad sampling event. So it's not gonna look too much different than any of the previous ones, but we will share it. And I think that will be pretty in the next 2 weeks for sure.
Thank you.
That help you out there, Jennifer?
Yes, yes, thank you.
On to another topic. Mary Price was going to talk about a request for boundary line relocation in a public hearing. Jerry, I don't see Mary on. Can you cover that?
I'm going to ask Dave Strohmeyer to jump in and cover that. I don't have any other information other than no public hearing has been scheduled yet. Dave, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's all I could add to. There will be a public hearing at some point in the future. We've requested that, but it has not been, well, if it's been scheduled, I'm not sure what the date is, but we can be sure to let the CAG know.
Okay, just for clarification, Dave or Jerry, this boundary line relocation in the public hearing, could you briefly describe why that's a request from CSKT?
Mostly because there's an ongoing investigation, and especially because the results aren't back from OU2, and it felt that just it was too soon to start relocating boundary lines in the process. That was my understanding. Allie, this was a couple months ago that this came up at our meeting, and that's when CAPS came in and talked to us about the process, and Keith can jump in too, but it just seemed like there was some concern that the process was skirting subdivision and some other things that were really of particular interest to the tribe and obviously to this group as well.
And I'll just jump in. Since this has not come before the commission yet, I have very little by way of knowledge of what's being proposed, but I suspect that eventually what we'll be needing to look at would be, does a boundary line relocation provide opportunity for some sort of activity or development that I think, as Jerry mentioned, is essentially subdividing a lot and creating impacts that otherwise might be picked up during a subdivision review process. And that's just shooting from the hip. So,
that was the concern, Dave. That was exactly what the concern was. And CAPS really expanded on that in our meeting about how that was something that was kind of a red flag, especially with the site, was that we didn't want to have any surprises from that. So that was really the crux of it.
Okay. Were there any other questions about that particular item? I understand it a little better now. I missed the meeting that it was discussed in. So if I don't see any hands, nobody's jumped in. So
Brian, this is Keith.
Yes.
Is this relocation like located in OU1 or OU2? Or does anybody know?
Jerry.
I'm going to go from memory, but I think it's both. That's what the concern was. I think it was mostly on OU1. Larry Weeks, who's not on this call, felt pretty strongly that should wait, I think, just based on his comments about the wildlife and some other stuff. I can't remember if it was Laura that wrote the article about the concerns that we all had, but I'll go back and look at what the application said. I don't recall off the top of my head.
Who submitted the application?
Wakefield Kennedy, Prospect, and then there was one other applicant that was named. There were 3 people that were named that wanted the boundary line relocation.
Do you have a copy of that application?
I can get one.
Yeah,
Dave, could you possibly help with that?
Yeah, Keith, I could get you whatever packet's been submitted to Missoula County.
Yeah, could you send those to both Allie and I, please?
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
All right, super. That was a good discussion. So, Dave, I guess you're up next on the agenda. It would be concerns regarding fish sampling status.
Sure. Jen Harrington did a great job of covering, some points I brought up at the last meeting. And it seems like we've already had a discussion over some of these topics. So just really briefly, especially for those that weren't on the call, regarding the fish tissue data, we collected samples in 2013 that showed some concern, and those were just collected just from downstream of the site. In 2018, we collected fish tissue samples from a variety of locations, both upstream of the site, those that may not be influenced by the site, and downstream of the site, ones that potentially could have been influenced by the site. In 2018, we collected all the samples that we wanted to, with the exception of a complete sample, or more or less with the exception of a complete sample from the Blackfoot River near Greeno. That was because of the conditions at the time. After that, there were a lot of concerns about our sample collection that were brought up by the PRPs, including the fact that we didn't collect trip blanks or samples of the environmental conditions at the time of the sampling. There were also concerns initially about some other potential sources of contaminants. It was uncertain whether EPA was going to use those 2018 samples, so we met with the EPA and came up with a study plan to resample the area as though those 2018 samples didn't exist. And in that study design, we included sites upstream of the mill and as well as downstream of the mill, but also in areas that were both up and downstream of other potential sources of contamination in the environment, right? Unfortunately, in 2019, because of conditions again, we couldn't get samples from the Blackfoot River at Greeno, the Clark Fork River at Clinton. Both of those are upstream of the site. Our samples that were collected downstream of the Bitterroot but upstream of the mill site were also limited. In addition, because we had a problem with one of our jet boats, we didn't collect a trip blank that day with that equipment. So we went into the sampling we went into the sampling season in 2019 knowing that we wouldn't be able to collect all of the samples because it was too late to start the sampling. So we had talked to EPA representatives about if we don't get, that we weren't going to get all the samples, and whatever we don't get, we would get in the spring of 2020 when the conditions are suitable, which is right now. Basically, starting from between April and the end of June, the conditions are ideal. And these samples, like from the Blackfoot or Clinton, we can get both of those in a day. When the conditions aren't ideal, it could take weeks to get the number of samples. So it's a big disparity. So in 2019, we didn't collect samples, those samples from the Blackfoot. So we basically have no samples from the Blackfoot. So I think there were 5 fish or something like that collected in 2018, but not a complete sample. So the plan was, as we left it in 2019, to finish the sampling in the spring of 2020. And that's what, I've been operating under that assumption. And it was expressed to us at the end of when we concluded the sampling in 2019, it was expressed to us very clearly that people with the EPA were very disappointed that we did not complete that sampling. Those samples were very, very important, especially to address the concerns of the PRPs, like the trip blanks, the sources of dioxins from the emissions of the outboard motor and the generator in the boat. So, like I said, we plan to collect them. But it seemed like in the early spring of 2020, that wasn't going to happen. And then that was later confirmed that we weren't going to collect those. So the question, it's a long story to get to the question I brought up, without seeing the data, is how that determination that those samples that were, expressed to us as extremely important a few months ago are not now deemed not necessary. Especially the trip blank. Frankly, I'm not really concerned with that. I don't think that that's a legitimate concern to sample the air around the boat as a source of dioxins and other contaminants that would be in fish tissue under the skin, in the tissue. But nevertheless, that's what EPA had determined was a necessary step to collect the samples in 2019. So I was just concerned that we agreed to the study design that included both treatment locations, ones that could be potentially influenced by the mill site, and control locations where you can separate out the effects of what occurs naturally or other sources of contaminants. Those seemed like important locations for sampling. And so I asked how that determination was made, that those were no longer important. And that those were my major concerns. The issue with, and just to be clear about the timeline, it seems like there's a little confusion about this. It's wonderful that the EPA is going to be using those 2018 samples. I felt much more comfortable with how those were collected and processed in 2018 than the ones in 2019. Trevor and his technician Lindsay processed those, so since they're using those data, those 2018 data, Trevor and Lindsay, could have processed the samples we could collect this spring. There's no need for, I don't believe, an out-of-state company to come in and process those samples, especially since it's such a small quantity. And it seemed like the decision to not collect those samples this spring was made before COVID happened. So I want to be clear about that. The decision not to sample wasn't because of COVID.
Yeah, well, and I did not realize that at the end of 2019 that had been communicated to Fish Wildlife Parks, because we had asked for the progress report and had a 1-year work plan. So I know we've had some different team members come and go, but that in my records isn't a clear communication that we'd be going out next spring. And part of the discussion the EPA team had prior to sampling in 2019 was, you guys are really great at communicating, the river conditions aren't ideal, we're going to have a limited data set. And prior to going into the river, we had to make that determination, are we still going to fly everyone out here, collect the samples, get them processed, if we don't think that this event is going to do it for us as far as risk assessments. And there was just one other thing I have to clarify, and I didn't realize that this had come across from on the last call, but as a part of the validation process, our next steps is to run a statistical analysis between 2018 and 2019. And so that determination to use 2018 data isn't set in stone yet. We're hopeful that we can use it, and we did take that into consideration when we made the determination at the start of 2019 as a complete data set. Can we statistically compare 2018 to 2019 and then justify its use for our EPA actions? And so that's going to be in the next month that we can kind of make that determination.
Dave, did that help?
You're talking to me or Dave Strohmeyer?
No, yeah, you.
Oh.
You're muted again.
I just made a note that the 2018 data may not be used, and that's news to me.
I'm curious, Allie, because Keith at the quarterly call said that we have 2 years of data, and no one corrected him during that call that the 2018 data may not actually be used.
And I was at the time confirming with the risk assessment team that we hadn't done the statistical analysis yet. And then I think a question got asked after that, and I forgot to go back to that statement Keith had made. But EPA has never confirmed that 2018 data will be used yet. I didn't catch it in time on the call just because I was confirming that that wasn't a part of the validation. That's a next step, is statistical comparison. And then I got a different question asked. So my mistake on not catching that right on that call. But hopefully there's some clarification now, and definitely we're hopeful we can use that data.
And that analysis, you say, Allie, is going to come out next week?
That'll be it'll take about a month to put out the 2019 data usability report. And as a part of that report, we will have a statistical comparison to the 2018 data and its usability going forward.
Okay. And if it's not used, then the viability of the 19 data, how well will that hold up?
So, well, the 2019 data was collected per all quality control, but I mean, that'll still be a part of the report. Any data usability concerns that came across, as far as it being a complete data set, if we don't have the 2018 data, that's just something that I would rather not, think about now. Hopefully we can use the data and we won't have to look at a truncated set, especially for cost recovery purposes. We really want to be able to use that data. But there's just this final step of comparing it to the 2019 data so that we feel that we can have defensible data moving forward.
So Allie, I guess I'm just wondering, when you're talking about so actually David was talking about the trip blanks, that was an issue with the 2018 data. In 2019, it was deemed not essential, all of it. So I'm just wondering how objectively are you determining the 2018 objections versus the usability of that data?
So there is a 2018 data usability report on our website. So that's already been kind of sorted out and is available. And there were several issues that made it that we were not able to use it on its own. So 2019, we went back out to collect additional data. And the hope is that the 2018 data will statistically match up with our 2019 data, but this will all be clearly documented in our report moving forward. Again, we've just received the validated data ourselves, and so I think there's going to be a lot of discussions on fish data moving forward. This is just the start of it. And so I don't have answers to all of these right now, but I know that that's what the toxicologists are going to be working on. We're hopeful we can use it for sure. For cost recovery, for risk assessment, it would be huge to have that data. But that's all going to be kind of hashed out in the next month. And then based on that, we'll go from there. We'll have a BTAG meeting, discuss what we found, what the results were. Do we need more data? Can we finalize our risk assessments? So these are all questions weighing heavily on everyone's minds for sure.
True. A lot of information there, Allie. A lot of concerns, I guess. Any other input for Allie on? Go ahead, Dave. Your hand's up. Gotcha.
Sorry about that. Yeah, Ellie, we can talk about this later. But when you said a statistical comparison is going to be made, what do you mean by that?
I think I imagine just to see if the 2018 data falls statistically within the 2019 data and can support that data set. But I'm not a. Oh. Yeah, support the data set, is aligned with the data we collected in 2019. We feel confident that there are no issues with the 2018 data, but I'm not like the statistician on that, have someone coming in to kind of inform us on that. And so I think that would be a better question for them to answer on the nuances of that comparison.
Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily the tests you'd be using. It's just what was the assumption there, that the 2019 data were accurate and the 2018 data needed to be corrected, or something?
No, I think.
Well, I mean, they could be, because the issue with the 2018 data was the rinsate we used, because the EPA's rinsate was never delivered to us. So we just used deionized water. but it was the same at every site. So apart from that, I don't know what the differences would be. And if you do see differences between 2018 and 2019, and it's not attributed to a rinse rate, I'm just wondering what the concern is, or how you're comparing one to the other. Because if those differences exist, what does that mean? Which year is? I mean, it could just be that they're relatively small sample sizes and a lot of variation, and maybe 20 fish per site isn't enough.
I don't have the 2018 report up, but I think a lot of the processing in the field was an issue brought up as could introduce contaminants, and so just eliminating any concerns that were brought up about those issues in 2018, so that we can have defensible data in our risk assessments. Sure,
and that's what we were trying to do. But one of my concerns, if the 2018 data aren't used, is that's another site at Clinton. We were able to get in 2018 that we couldn't collect in 2019. So that's just less power there.
Right.
And I'm not like I said, I'm explaining this for people that weren't on the last call and haven't been involved in a lot of these conversations, just so people understand where my concerns are. And like I mentioned on the call, I mean, it's without seeing the data, it's
impossible.
It's hard to understand, how you arrive at these decisions. And it might be something like, once you see the data, you'll understand. But in lieu of that, when you start talking about, the controls aren't necessary, or these other measures aren't necessary, that's the reason I'm concerned. It ultimately,
and that's why
it might not be a big deal, but.
And that's why I just talked about the data quality objectives for our work plan and how they were specific to Superfund's needs. And so when we looked at the reaches that you guys were confident that we could get fish prior to going out in 2019, the risk assessors determined that if we can still get that data set, then it would inform our risk assessments, and that we can possibly get through the risk assessment phase and get through the RI phase. And so we do have the validated data map. That's going to say a lot of information, and I'm excited for everyone to look through it and have some good discussions going forward about how we incorporate the 2018 data and how we're going to prepare the 2019 data moving forward. But I think these are all great conversations that I want to have Brian involved in as well, and especially with the whole BTAG group too.
All right. Any other discussion on this topic? Oh, all right. We have Laura.
Yep. Just a question kind of related to this data. When you're doing the statistical analysis and say some of the data doesn't jibe, is it the 2018 or the 2019 data that's getting thrown out?
I think that's going to be a part of the report that comes out in 2019, but currently the 2018 data would not on its own be allowed to be used in an EPA risk assessment to make remedy decisions. And so we still haven't done a data usability for 2019, but saying that hopefully our 2019 data is defensible quality data, then we'd have to, and if 2018 doesn't match up, then we would only have the 2019 data set, and we'd have to go collect more samples to finalize our risk assessments.
So right now you're saying the 2019 has a little bit more oomph to it, and that's the kind of one you're going with. And if the 2018 jibes to that, then you can use that also?
All I can say is we've done a data usability for 2018, and we still have to do that for 2019. So so that would be determined when we have our usability for 2019.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Anybody else? All right. We are now an hour into our meeting. We're over with at 7:30. We have two other agenda items and then public comments. So
Brian, Mary Price did get onto the call.
Yes. Yeah, I see Mary there. And it's funny that you should say that. Mary, we did discuss a little bit on the boundary line relocation and the public hearings. I'm sorry you missed that discussion, but do you have more are you still there, Mary?
Yes, I am.
There you are.
Here I
You
am.
came up as a picture. Very good.
Okay.
Do you have something that you can share with us on the boundary line relocation? We were unclear.
Sure. Yeah, and I apologize for being late, missing the earlier discussion. I think I was asked just to provide an overview of the tribe's request to the Missoula County Commissioners for a public hearing on the boundary line relocation application. And it's pretty straightforward. We submitted this request on February 25th. It's very simple. We're just we're noting that the proposal is within the exterior boundaries of the Smurfit Stone Superfund site, and that the site is, we noted that the potentially responsible parties in the administrative order of consent are different from the applicants for this boundary line readjustment. And so our assessment was that it warranted a public hearing so that we could understand how this potential boundary line relocation could affect the remedial investigation, how these two processes intersect or don't, and what the ramifications are for the remedial investigation. And as far as I know, the county commissioners have not taken any action or made any decision yet. We did copy EPA and DEQ in the event there is a public hearing. We're hoping they can attend and speak to this question of how these two processes intersect.
All right, Dave, do you have any comments for Mary?
No, not other than there will be a public hearing. I just don't have when the date for that will be.
Okay, thank you.
Any other interest? Bruce, we chatted earlier about this. Is there any other input you might have?
No, not on that.
All right, Jerry? Thank you, Mary. I'm curious about that. I maybe attend that particular public hearing. And I'm not a public guy. All right, we're down to Bruce Sims. He has a presentation, a PowerPoint. We're going to give it a try. Bruce, and your PowerPoint presentation's on the, what is it, the storm flooding?
Right. I think we may have had a kind of a near miss this last February from flooding. And I just wanted to talk about the flood that occurred in eastern Oregon and southeastern Washington. Just to wake everybody up to what can occur. It was a February flood, and I think it's worth looking at just as a wake-up call. Going up to southeast Alaska, they've had their first extreme drought in recorded history. And so what do you think? What does this have to do with western Montana? Well, oops, sorry. Computer's working slower than my fingers. Within the last 2 years, storm systems that normally hit southeast Alaska have tended to move west toward the Bering Sea or curve south toward the Pacific Northwest, taking their rain and snow with them. And this was by a climatologist at the University of Alaska, this comment. So February 4th, our weather service here in Missoula issued this discussion point. And I'm going to read it to you. Tonight kicks off a very active period of weather for central Idaho and western Montana. An atmospheric river will bring a lot of moisture, followed by warm air and even more moisture during a period extending from tonight through Friday. This is a very atypical atmospheric river for the region. Normally, they approach from the southwest or west, but this one is approaching from the northwest. As a result, we don't have any good historical systems to compare it to. And so there's the context. Come on. So here's the satellite image of this atmospheric river that they were talking about, taken on 2/5 of this year. And you can see it arcs around and just slams into the northwestern US. As luck would have it, the real focus of the rainfall energy was south of us about 100 miles or so. And in high elevation, I go back to that a minute.
Bruce, are you sharing something?
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it's not showing, Bruce.
Oh dear, let me go back then. I am so sorry, because I thought I was doing it.
Okay, where's that sharing thing on their screens?
I don't know how to get out of this now. Shoot. Okay. Share screen. Share. Can you see it now?
Nothing but blank. There we go.
Oh, super. Okay.
Just
we'll go
fast
down.
forward.
The narrative parts have all. No.
You all heard.
Well, you've all heard. Let me go down to this one. And here is the atmospheric river, the satellite image of the atmospheric river. Can you see that now?
Yeah.
Oh, super. And so this huge band of moisture just plowed right in from the northwest, right into northwestern US. And the real focus of this storm happened to be a little bit south of us, but not much. And the point here is that this type of storm could easily encompass the entire Clark Fork watershed. And it would be a multi-day front. It wouldn't be just an overnight rain. Okay, so what happened in southeast or eastern Washington and Oregon, northeast Oregon? Oh my God, my slideshow is getting covered up by faces here, but
just fast summarize.
So I looked at 3 snow courses in that area in northeastern Oregon and in southeastern Washington. And they were at 3,800 feet, 4,900 feet, and 5,500 feet. Okay. So the one at 5,500 feet, the highest, they had 9.5 inches of precip in that period, Tuesday through Friday. And but it all stayed in snow. But you go down just a little bit to 4,920 feet, and there was 9.8 inches of precip, but roughly 5.2 inches was likely to be of runoff from that period. So a lot of snow came off that snowpack, clear up at 4,900 feet, and we dropped down to 3,800 feet, and roughly they had less total precip, 4.5 inches, but 3.3 inches came off as runoff. And so that's the point, that these huge storms that come in with warm air can really melt the snowpack and set up the stage for some pretty significant flooding. Okay, I looked at a couple of snow courses in Bitterroot, and here's the Sleeping Woman snow course up just above Frenchtown, near above 6 Mile Creek, actually. And they had only 2.9 inches in the storm, or 1.3 inches respectively. So we didn't really get the brunt of the storm here. But northeastern Oregon and southeastern Washington got record-breaking storms. They had 86 years of record on the Umatilla River. The previous peak flow at this USGS Gaben station at Gibbon, Oregon, was 6,220 cubic feet per second. Okay, and that was on November 28th in 1995. Well, this flood nearly doubled it. it went up to 12,000, just over 12,000 cubic feet per second. So here you had 86 years of record, and then this one storm doubled the runoff. You know, so this is the kind of thing that can happen with this type of event. And just so you can see on that gauge, the green line here on this graph, can you see that? That's the flood stage for this river. And you can see how much higher it went, up to 12,000 cubic feet per second. The red line at the top of the graph would have overtopped the stream gauge. They couldn't have measured any deeper. So it's just an amazing flood event. This was the old graph that showed the 86 years of data and the peak floods for 86 years. You would have to double the size of this graph going up to measure the flow that they had in February. Okay, just to kind of put it into visual here. And then I wanted to just mention that these kinds of floods happen in Montana as well. And the last big one was this 1964 flood up on the North Fork of the Flathead River. And you can see all these multiple years of data on this graph, but yet that one outlier flood way up here, in this case, 140,000 cubic feet per second, when the second highest flood was 60,000 roughly. So these types of storms happen in Montana too, and that one killed 28 people and caused multi-million dollars worth of damage to Flathead County and surrounds. And this is a picture of what that flood looked like. And you can see the telephone poles half submerged. I believe that's where the railroad track is. Along the Flathead. And so just to get an idea of what we're talking about here, these enormous flows. So does climate warming change the risk of flooding? And most experts say yes, in fact it does. And this is a climatologist from the University of Washington that he suggests that the atmospheric rivers of water vapor coming out of the tropics and subtropics will be substantially enhanced by global warming. And basically he's saying that we have a higher probability of these things occurring, and they may really affect flood flows. And he's saying more so in the fall than other times. And that was, hang on, this thing is slow. That was Cliff Mass, who's professor of atmospheric sciences at the University of Washington, making this comment. And he has an online blog that he puts on weekly that discusses issues regarding flooding and climate change. Come on. Okay, we all know that global temperatures are rising, roughly about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit globally, and of course surface temperatures too, global surface temperatures. Last one was ocean water warming, and it's gone up over 1 degree Fahrenheit, and then the atmospheric temperatures have gone up about 2 degrees. Okay, so we know that that's happening. And just to drive it home, this graph shows the number of days that Missoula in a decade got below zero. So in 1900, the decade from 1900 to 1909, roughly in that decade, it was about 81 times that Missoula got below zero. By the decade in 2020s, it got below zero in that decade 142 times. And just so, oh, sorry. So you can just see that things have changed. The number of times Missoula goes below zero have greatly reduced. And it's another evidence that things are changing. Okay, this is what happens to a confined river. This happens to be in Walla Walla, Washington. This was taken in the 1965 flood, which roughly rivaled the flood they just had that that wiped out all kinds of recreational cottages just upstream from where this picture is taken. But it wasn't nearly as severe as what hit the Matella River. But you can see that the river reestablished its meanders right down through these levees. And what happens is in these large floods, these huge slugs of sediment migrate down channel. Of course, they raise the bed of the river bottom, and the water reaches these levees. And that's just the fact of life. And this is just one of the more beautiful pictures I've ever seen of levee failure because it's so systematic. So our site, this is the Landsat image, or not Landsat, but the Google Earth image of the mill site right in here. And you can see on this image all these historic, and I say historic meanders all through this site. This floodplain in recent history has been all over this valley. Now, what is a particular concern to the site to me, this drainage comes down the lower left side here, and you see a lot of deposit right here into the river that's forced this river channel part bend over to the right side in this image. Now the berm, controlling berm of the mill site is right in harm's way from this deposit here, and I think of failure points, that's the most likely in a large flood, but that's not the only place it would fail in a large magnitude flood. But I just want to point this out that to me is just waiting, it's leading with the chin right through here. And there has been some riprap placed in there because it has experienced erosion in the past, but it's not an engineered levee, nor do I think it could adequately be engineered to withstand the major flood. So I have 3 questions that I think we need to ask, if I can get them to come on. Okay. You know, will the surface stone risk assessment and the actions taken adequately take flooding into account due to climate change, basically? And do we have enough sampling to know the spatial distribution of contaminants and the risk to water quality should significant portions of the Smurfit site be flooded and that earth washing into the river? And will our restorations be effective in 50 years? I think we have to address all 3 of those questions if we're going to do an adequate job. And so that's what I have. Stop share. Okay. Oops, Brian, you're on mute. I can see your lips moving.
Thank you, Bruce. That was excellent.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, you're right. I'm muted. I had a question though. You presented this in the past, Bruce, is that correct?
We presented it at the last meeting we had at the fire station in Frenchtown.
Was that January or February?
February.
And Allie, have you seen this?
I haven't. I was just going to ask if you could share it, the presentation.
Yeah, definitely.
In as much as the questions that you had posed at the end sound to me like those need to go into Allie's work.
Well, that's my questions. Whether they've been addressed, they may have. You know, but
we haven't seen the data.
I haven't seen them addressed.
All right. Because we're just about done with the meeting, I'd like to leave that with Allie, and Bruce, if you could pass that on, she would appreciate it. I also had a question for Dave Strohmeyer. Dave, have you seen this presentation?
No, I have not.
Did it pique your interest at all, or is the county interested in floods?
Yeah, we do take an interest in floods and the potential for floods. I think the presentation raises some super salient points as far as needing to be forward looking and recognize extraordinary events that clearly do happen.
And maybe the possibility that with the change in our climate, we might experience more of those. Okay. So I would like to leave it at that unless there are people who have real burning issues and want to share them. None. Oh, Rich, go ahead, man.
Yeah, I've been wondering about that gentleman from the university. I forget his name. And he had some great data on the chicks of the ospreys. But all he collected was heavy metals, but he still had all the samples there that could be looked at for other things like dioxin, and it would supplement that fish studies tremendously, in my opinion. And I was wondering if we're doing any more on that.
We did discuss it, I think, in the meeting after that was brought up. Jerry and Allie, I think, addressed that. So which one would like to share first? Oh, Jerry, wait a minute. None of that stuff in the meeting. And you're muted. Jerry, you're muted.
Sorry. We sent a letter to Greg Slopkin and asked him for some funding so that we could have Dr. Green do some additional research, because we also felt really strongly that his research could augment what was also being done with fish, wildlife, and parks and such. And he came back and said that they weren't interested in funding Dr. Green's research, that they had sampled kingfisher and that they felt that that was enough information. So we sent some correspondence to Dr. Green, and I think that once the COVID-19 gets over, we'll contact Dr. Green again. It's kind of been radio silence with him, but we'll contact him again, and then we'll write another letter to Greg Slopkin and see if we can't collaborate further on some funding to help with his study, because we there's some really excellent information. So that's kind of where that got left. Allie, did you?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. I think for our purposes so far, we do have a piscivorous fish that we're looking into for our risk assessments. And so that's why they felt that for the Smurfit site, it might not be the funding from our site, but if there are other ways that EPA could help fund this research, then that would probably be more suitable.
Okay.
Perfect. We have two tasks to review, and then public comments. And Jerry, you're the two tasks that we have: the technical assistance grant and Facebook page, public notifications. So
Jen does a great job with Facebook, and really appreciate all her work that goes into that. She's a rock star when it comes to that. So appreciate the effort on that ongoing. The tag grant, we got the green light to go ahead and apply. We have until the end of September to get that grant in. So Brian and Don and Larry Shadow and Ken Crisp, I think we need to get a meeting. It's less than 10 people, so I think we're okay. And Don has graciously let us know that we can use his house. So I think that's something we can do. I've got all the materials, and I'd love to, if there's other people who want to be involved in the grant writing process, just shoot us an email and we'll involve you. But that's kind of where that's at right now. So we've got all the information. No other group expressed interest in joining in on our grant. So it's a green light.
Excellent. Any questions or comments? Then we're down to public comments and non-agenda items. Do we have any folks that have a question, comment, or a burning issue they'd like to share?
I have a question for Dave.
I'd just offer a shout out to the CAG for making this happen. Thanks everybody for putting together a virtual meeting. I think it's a big help, and sure appreciate all your work making it happen and everything else you're doing as well. So thanks everyone.
Don Latham, you had something to say?
I had a question for Dave.
Which Dave?
Oh, Maryland. Dave, how do you keep your loading bench so darn clean? Mine's a shambles.
Cleanliness is important. Yeah. It's a great question.
Keep your powder dry.
Exactly.
Well, if there aren't any, I do have one question. It's back to the recycling permit and application, and I'm unfamiliar with the recycling request to go to Smurfit Stone, and I guess my concern is if we do get a recycling center there of whatever kind of material, my concern is, I want to call it overburden, but I haven't found a recycling center or a garbage dump that doesn't send some of its product willy-nilly out into the environment. And I'm wondering Dave, maybe you're the guy to talk to on it, but is there provisions within the proposal to deal with that?
Yeah, let me jump in here. So what we're talking about is final cycles. And they have been going full steam ahead through COVID-19. It might have not have been fully public to date, but I have encouraged them to reach out to this group, the CAG, to the West Valley Community Council, and inform the community what they're proposing out there at Smurfit Stone. So basically what they are looking at, and it's not altogether unproven technology. It's not that widespread in the United States, apparently, but they're looking at a pyrolysis process whereby they would take plastics and in a closed system, essentially melt the plastics, and the byproduct of this would be fuel, diesel fuel, or I can't recall the other possible byproducts, carbon black. As recently as a couple of weeks ago, they are now proposing that that they might potentially generate electricity from this process, but it's not something that the Board of County Commissioners is really in a regulatory position to oversee. But that's my understanding of the process. I think it would certainly be beneficial for this group on the line tonight to hear directly from them in terms of what they're proposing. But that's basically it. It's not a full scale all material recycling facility by a long shot. The reason why they want the rail spur is that I think they are looking at potentially bringing in material from outside of the Missoula area to feed their facility.
So Dave, can you get me contact information, and I'll reach out to them and see if they would be willing to provide the CAG some information at our next meeting, if everybody's amenable to that. Is that of interest to folks?
Well, it is to me. It's the volatiles that would be stored, the possible discharge of volatiles. We got rid of a very smelly environment, has stopped operating. I wouldn't want another one to come in, and I certainly wouldn't want VOCs to be discharged. So I'm interested.
And I've been looking at their website a lot. It's just finalcycles.org, and they have like their mission and a fax page, and I think they probably have contact on there too. So that was kind of fascinating to go through of what it kind of goes into detail and everything.
Jerry, I will make a connection for you with them so you can communicate directly.
Yeah, just call me, let me know, and we'll go from there. And then I'll just send an email to the group and let everybody know what's happening with that. I don't know if we're going to be able to have a June meeting. I don't know what the fire station's, if the fire station is going to allow us to meet. There's 23 of us on this call right now, and I don't know what the restrictions are going to look like. So in the next few weeks, I guess we'll know, but I certainly will touch base with them.
Great.
All right. Thank you, Dave and Jerry.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Jennifer. Okay.
I guess I'm just interested in the opinion of Trevor Selch on the statistical analysis of the fish data. What your opinion is of that?
Yes, Trevor. You're Trevor. You're muted. There you go. You got to find it. Upper, yeah. Still muted. Upper right. Jennifer, it sounds like Trevor's got a lot of opinion, but can't get it out.
I just unmuted him.
Okay. There you go, Trevor. Turn your volume up. Trevor, you're still either muted. Okay. Jen, I'm sorry. We gave it a try.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, Trevor. We're past our meeting time. We've kept most everybody here. Does anybody have a suggestion other than doing the recycle center for an agenda item next month?
Before we get to that, I was just going to say, Trevor, since we couldn't hear you, could you respond to Jen's question via email to us? I think we're all very interested in the answer to that. I'd really like to hear your perspective. Yeah, okay.
Will do, yes.
That was a thumbs up, so okay, thanks.
And Jerry, can we tentatively set up a Zoom meeting for the June CAG meeting in the event that we can't meet in person?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, this seemed to work pretty well. It was really nice to see everybody's home, background, kids and dogs. I think we're all working at home in one way or another. Makes us all real, doesn't it? So, Jerry, Bruce, do you guys have anything to close out with the CAG folks?
No, I'm good, but I really enjoyed this actually. I think it was an effective meeting, and you know, people don't have to drive over in snowstorms from Helena to come here, so, or fly from Denver. So in a way, it's a pretty cost-effective way to hold our meeting. Just my comments for what they're worth.
I guess I have a question. I got a question with that. Allie, is there a rule that EPA can't do a virtual meeting with some of the data that we might still be looking at September if this comes out? Is that something?
Yeah, I think it's you guys can invite us to Zoom, and then we can kind of perfect our virtual presentations. But I would check with my manager, but I don't think there's any restrictions on EPA participating.
Okay.
All right, then. I want to thank everybody for their participation. And really, the muting has helped a whole bunch. One thing I didn't talk about when we started was we all have different internet services, and some of them are really good, and some of them, Bruce, are not so good. So as we get on these Zoom conferences, recognize that there are some lags in the internet service that people like up the 6 Mile have, and give them a break. Try to allow them to respond when you ask them a question, and know that there might be a little lag. They're closer to the moon than we are. So, Jerry, you want to close it out, and we're done.
Yeah, just thanks everybody. Really nice to see everybody. Brian, can you and Dawn stay on and we can chat about the TAG grant real quick?
Okay.
But I hope everybody stays healthy, stay safe, and we will set up a Zoom meeting for next month. So that's all I have.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
See you, folks. Thank you.